to get up with the MVP. Mahomes back in the building to start the season today. Will he be better than ever? And will it land Kansas City in the Super Bowl? Plus, they are the stars of the show, and they seem to always have a lot to say. Can these two receivers lead their long-struggling teams to the playoffs? And will it all get ugly if they don't? And then, just who is this Tua they're all tanking for? And what one thing does he need to become worth it? Those are the questions. We've got the answers. It's time to get up, starting right now from New York on a Tuesday. Thank you so very much for getting up with us today. Orlovsky is here. Rutledge is ready to go. And once again, the one, the only, Booger McFarland is in our studio. He was there last season to watch the Kansas City Chiefs allow 54 points on a Monday night football game, and then, of course, give up the one touchdown at the end of their season that would otherwise have had them in the Super Bowl. So can they take the next step? Well, it begins today with Patrick Mahomes reporting to camp coming off a season in which he threw 50 touchdowns, one that culminated with the first NFL MVP award in Chiefs history. He'll now try to become just the fifth player to repeat his MVP. He's back, but several key defenders are gone. Eric Berry, D Ford, Justin Houston, Alan Bailey, Orlando Scandrick, all no longer with the Chiefs off what was a terrible defensive season. Now, their GM filled the needs with big acquisitions. Tyrann Mathieu, trading for Frank Clark, adding a variety of other names on that defensive side of the ball. And then last Friday, of course, big news as the NFL announced that Tyreek Hill would not be suspended despite allegations of abuse, and the Chiefs said he will be with the team for the start of training camp. So those are the storylines surrounding Kansas City, and add it all up, the Chiefs own the second best odds to win the title this year, behind only the team that beat them in the AFC Championship game in their own building a year ago. Chicago, New Orleans, and Cleveland are the only other teams with 10-1 odds or better, according to our friends at Caesars Sportsbook. And so let's bring it out and let's talk about this here. And obviously, any conversation about the Chiefs begins, Dan, with Patrick Mahomes, their superstar quarterback. And it's not really his sophomore year, obviously. It will be his third year. But they do sometimes talk about a sophomore slump for these players. Are you worried about that at all with Mahomes?
No, not at all. I mean, Patrick Mahomes himself has said, I can be better. And the scary thing is, he can be, because the same pieces that were around him last year and the talent was around him last year is still there. The same special plays that he was making last year are still going to be available because Andy Reid's still their play caller. Their offensive line is still going to be intact, and he's still got guys like Tyreek Hill. He still has a Kelsey. So all those people around him are still around. They drafted McCole Hardman out of Georgia, so this team is going to have a ton of speed. The crazy thing is this, Greeny. He can get better because last year, although he was great with some of these tight window throws and the throws that defied odds, he missed a lot of open guys. He was below the league average in completion percentage to guys that Andy Reid schemed open. Just imagine what's going to happen if Patrick Mahomes hits some kind of layups. The numbers could get astronomical.
He may have to be better, because the last version I remember of the Chiefs were Patrick Mahomes standing on the sideline and Tom Brady marching up and down the field in the AFC Championship game. This defense was atrocious, guys. Let's just be honest with you. And it started on the back end. Their corners, Nelson and Fuller, were terrible. They have to be better. I know they make a new acquisition in Frank Clark. D Ford was a great pass rusher. Frank Clark is a better overall player. He will be able to give them a lot more. But this defense was the Achilles heel last year. Think about this, guys. They gave up 500 yards 4 times last year, and they were 2-2 because of how great the offense was.
That's, I think, an important point to be made, and we just did it on SportsCenter a few minutes ago as well. But for those of you who are just joining us here, is that sometimes with these super high-flying offensive teams, the defensive numbers get thrown out of whack because they're playing all these games from in front. But this was not the case. No. This defense was just flat out terrible at times.
Greedy, it's hard to give up 500 yards in the National Football League. They did it 4 times, and it starts with an overall scheme. Bob Sutton, who was a defensive coordinator, played a lot of two-man, played a lot of man-to-man. He put the corners in a situation where they had to cover man-to-man, and Fuller and Nelson just couldn't do it. Now you bring in an entirely new set of corners. The Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, is back, and so the defense, scheme-wise, should be better, but they have to play better, because if they don't, Mahomes is going to have to be better than he was last year, and that's almost impossible.
And to touch on the defense, and I know that they replaced Bob Sutton with Steve Spagnuolo, who has had some success as a coordinator in the NFL, but if you look at the last 4 years, he's been a defensive coordinator. His defenses have ranked 24th, 30th, 32nd, and then he had a year in the Giants in 2016 where they were second when they were like 8th in the league in turnovers. So although, yes, Honey Badger and Juan Thornhill out of Virginia, draft pick for them, are additions to their defense, their defensive line is worse today than it was last year because the 2 pass rushers are gone. Their corners are technically worse. So I have massive concerns about this defense.
I disagree with you, Eddie. D Ford was a really good pass rusher. Frank Clark is a better overall player. You add in Chris Jones, who may or may not show up to camp. We'll find out later in the day. I think the defensive line will be better. Where the big question mark will be is in the secondary. Can Tyrann Mathieu be used the right way? Can the corners hold up? That will be the big issue for them.
I can't decide if this is the good news or the bad news, but one way or another, it can't get worse, right? I mean, you can't be worse defensively than they were a year ago when they gave up, 54 points to the Rams and then gave up the touchdown that kept their team out of the Super Bowl. So we'll see what Kansas City does as, again, their star quarterback is in camp today. Let's stay in the division in the AFC West and talk about the Raiders, who are entering their second season now under John Gruden. Oakland's rookies reporting to training camp today. It is a class that includes not one, not two, but three first-round selections from this past year. They're one of just 4 teams in the last 15 years to make 3 picks in the first round of the draft. They could end up being the only team in the last 40 years to start 3 first-round picks in week 1 of their rookie seasons. The Browns did it just a couple of years ago with Myles Garrett, Jabril Peppers, and David Njoku. And so let's start here, Booger, with the Raiders. This was supposed to be a situation where they hire John Gruden, you give him $100 million, you give him all of the time and the leeway to build this thing slowly and from the ground up. Isn't that what this was supposed to be?
It was supposed to be that, Green, but typical Gruden, I think Gruden wants to win. I don't think he can be patient and wait till they get to Las Vegas, because if you look at the acquisitions they made this offseason, Antonio Brown, Trent Brown on the offensive line, you look at Williams, everything that they've done from a standpoint of trying to win now, bolstering up the defense, they're in win-now mode. They're not waiting until they get to Vegas. And I think if you do that and couple the relationship of John Gruden and Derek Carr together, they want to go out and they want to win now. We'll see if they can do it.
Well, the pressure lies on Derek Carr. I mean, you talk about the additions that they made. You know, I'm a believer in Derek Carr. You know, I honestly believe that he's one of the better young players at quarterback in the National Football League. Statistically, he's one of the better deep ball throwers in all of the NFL. But he hasn't had guys like that. The pressure's on him. Listen, the contract, we all know they can get out of it in a year. But the pressure's on him to prove that the acquisitions that they made are worth it. I talk about his ability to throw the ball deep when he's had guys that can go down the field and make some plays. Now they add in an Antonio Brown, who's one of the best deep ball receivers in the NFL over the last 6 or 7 years. They added Tyrell Williams. These guys were not just signed by the Raiders because they're good receivers. They're signed by the Raiders because they do deep ball play action or deep ball pass game in the NFL really well, and so does Derek Carr. So the pressure's on him to go, you got guys specifically good at something for me, and I need to make sure that I perform, because Derek Carr's probably got till November to prove to John Gruden, I am your guy for the future.
Let's clarify what you said when you said everybody knows about the contract. Let's make sure you do. After this season, they can walk away from Derek Carr and owe him literally nothing. So it is in every single way make or break for them. And I totally agree with what you said. You played for John Gruden, so you know him better than most. I worked with him. He was on my show every week for 10 years. I know something about the way his mind works. He wasn't waiting 2 years. He just couldn't do it. He literally, I think he went into it thinking that's what I'm going to do. And then they started losing games. And he said, you know what, this isn't for me. So to me, there is no pressure, no player in the NFL facing more pressure to succeed this season on one way of looking at it than Derek Carr, because I think his job completely hangs in the balance.
Yeah, and I would say he's probably got the smallest window to do it as well. Like I just stated, he's got till November or so to prove to John Gruden, I'm part of your 2020 plans moving forward, because they butted heads a little bit last year. Derek Carr has struggled now. He has had no help around him, but he has struggled the past couple of years. And John Gruden's going to be sitting there going, listen, dude, if you don't get it together, you're not my guy.
And look, let's just be honest here, okay? Antonio Brown is a great player. Yeah. But he played with a Hall of Fame quarterback who was as established as you could be in Pittsburgh, and we saw how that went. So let's see how Derek Carr is able to manage that relationship.
And I'm not sure we should put all the pressure on Derek Carr. What about John Gruden? We play in a league, and we work in a league, the National Football League, where you have to acquiesce to your talent. Okay, you have to put a scheme in. If the scheme can't work, then I'm going to trash it and fit it around my talent. How come John Gruden can't fit it around Derek Carr? Because the Derek Carr, I remember, he was a Pro Bowl player. He could throw the football down the field. Then he got his leg hurt. He broke the ankle. He hasn't been the same since. Can John Gruden help Derek Carr out by calling plays that Carr's familiar with and he can execute?
Can I answer your question with a question? What's 10 minus 1?
9.
That's how many years Gruden has left on his contract. Okay?
I get it.
He's not in any pressure at all. John Gruden can rebuild this team 3 times if he wants to before they will get rid of him. They will get rid of Derek Carr, I believe, to your point, Dan, by the end of this year if it doesn't go well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm telling you, John Gruden might get to the bye week and have his mind made up if Carr's his guy for the future or not.
Can Carr handle Antonio Brown? If that thing starts getting sideways, will Carr be able to massage the situation?
I think so. Derek Carr's temperament is one that I love. He's calm. He doesn't get flustered. I think the relationship, he knows I have AB for a reason. I have to get him to football. He's smart, and I think he will.
We have a ton of football to get through this morning. There's a lot of other news out there. Laura, let's get up and go.
Let's do it. And we begin with the Giants coming to terms with quarterback Daniel Jones on his rookie contract last night. Dan, are the Giants making the right call by seemingly sticking with Eli, not making it an open quarterback competition in camp?
Absolutely. There's something to be said about being okay to develop a quarterback. Drew Brees was developed. Tom Brady was developed. It's okay to sit and learn from a guy who's older. And then Eli Manning is still servable at the quarterback spot.
To baseball, the White Sox became the first major league team to extend protective netting from foul pole to pole, starting with their game last night against the Marlins. Now, the netting would come into play for the first time in the second inning. Curtis Granderson there made a catch in foul territory down the left field line just before the ball would have hit the net and been ruled a foul ball. Washington Wizards GM Tommy Shepard confirmed to our Adrian Wojnarowski that the team will offer All-Star guard Bradley Beal a 3-year, $111 million max contract extension on Friday, the first day Beal is eligible to sign. Beal has until October 21st to sign the extension, which would start with the 2021-22 season. Now, speaking of Bradley Beal, he's one of the latest in a line of NBA stars to recently withdraw from playing with Team USA in the World Cup this summer. Tobias Harris was also withdrawn from the team, and number 1 overall pick Zion Williamson plans to skip the Team USA training camp playing for the select team. 6 players in total have withdrawn for various reasons. That doesn't include Damian Lillard and Kevin Love, who are currently on the roster but haven't reached a final decision. That's according to Team USA Managing Director Jerry Colangelo. Back to the NFL. Browns wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. revealed in a new GQ cover story that he felt disrespected by the New York Giants when they traded him to Cleveland earlier this offseason. Here's some of what he said. Quote, "I felt disrespected because I felt like I was a main reason to keeping the brand alive. They were getting primetime games still as a 5-11 team. Why? Because people want to see the show. You want to see me play. That's just real rap." He also went on to say, "I'm not sitting here like it's just because of me, but let's be real. That's why we're still getting primetime games. I felt disrespected. They weren't even man enough to sit me down to my face and tell me what's going on." So we are now joined by NFL analyst Ryan Clark. And Ryan, what was your initial reaction to seeing Odell's quotes?
Well, I mean, are we really surprised? I mean, this is a guy who last year with Josina Anderson talked about the head coach and the play calling. He talked about the starting quarterback who may be a future Hall of Famer and is definitely a New York Giant legend. Listen, this is how Odell Beckham Jr. feels. And when you feel this way, sometimes when you get opportunities to say these things, you become comfortable enough to say them. And that's where Odell Beckham Jr. is. And listen, he's not far off. If you're the New York Giants and you're a storied franchise, you're going to get a primetime game against the Dallas Cowboys because they feel like that's a rivalry that the world wants to see. But make no mistake about it, when we were tuning in, it wasn't to see Eli Manning flail around the pocket and try to throw balls when he was getting pressured from every right defensive end in the NFL. It was to see Odell Beckham Jr. make plays. I mean, the next exciting player on that team the last few years played the safety position in Landon Collins. So Odell Beckham Jr. is kind of telling the truth about the reason that team was still relevant, but he needs to get out of his feelings and understand that these teams, these organizations that have been around way longer than all of these players who are playing now have, they don't owe you anything. That's not the way business is done. Business is not always done sitting you down, holding your hand, and talking you through.
Yeah, we'll see if he gets out of his feelings when he gets out on the field with the Browns. And you actually spent some time with Odell's new team during OTAs. Mm-hmm. How do you anticipate OBJ and Baker Mayfield playing together?
You know, these are personalities that are kind of alike. These are guys who kind of understand this new generation, who are a huge part of this generation, who seem like they want to have fun. And when you walk around that building, Baker Mayfield has a command of not only that offense, but of that building. Baker Mayfield is more important than Freddie Kitchen, more important than Todd Monken. Baker Mayfield is the guy that makes that thing go. And he also understands what he has in Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. Then you also have Njoku. So this offense is going to be great. I think Baker Mayfield has the perfect personality to go with a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. And if you've been around him, if you knew him in college, you understand what the relationship with Jarvis Landry means to him, what that relationship makes him behave like, the type of guy that holds Odell Beckham Jr. accountable for his actions, for his words, and for the way he moves around the building. So I think this is the place he needs to be right now. Going forward, we'll see.
Yeah, Jarvis Landry may be the glue that holds it all together. Thanks so much, Ryan Clark. Back on TV. Good thing you remembered how to do it. And Greeny, they said much more, Odell Beckham Jr. did in this article.
Yeah, I was really interested in this quote, and I'd like to bounce it off you guys. I watch other players, he says, in the NFL be able to go to Vegas and get wild and go on stage and be videotaped and chugging beer or whatever, going crazy. And it's like, oh, man, look at how much fun he's having. Look how he's having a blast. This is amazing. Then Odell was asked if he's done anything as inappropriate as, say, Rob Gronkowski, and he says, probably not. It's the same thing. It's like, why can't I have fun? People tell me I'm supposed to be a role model, but what are they supposed to be? We're human beings at the end of the day. And one of the really dangerous things that we do sometimes is we sit and we psychoanalyze people from a distance. Yeah. But you, RC, who's talking about it, has known the kid for a very long time, since he was a kid, Odell Beckham, since he was, a kid, and you have as well. Mm-hmm. So when you hear him saying things like that, like, why do they judge me differently than they judge other people? What do you hear when he's saying that? Well,
he's a guy that's always kind of attracted himself to the limelight ever since he was in high school, going all the way to college at LSU. His mother ran track, so he's felt stardom for a while. What I would tell Odell is really simple. Hey, you're asking for this. Like, when you have the blonde hair and when you have the Michael Jackson cross earring, people are going to be attracted to you. When you're a playmaker in New York and when you're in one of the biggest markets, people are going to be attracted to you. And when you're on social media and you're posting and you're telling everybody what you're doing, how you're doing it, when you're doing it, you are attracting the attention to yourself. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, hey, come follow me, come watch me, come see what I'm doing. But when I do it and people comment on it, you can't say, no, don't comment. You as a star have to take the good with the bad. If you don't want people to know, then don't post it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Barry Bonds was the first guy to have the cross earring. But I'd say this about Odell. If you have 8 for 150 and 2 touchdowns, I don't necessarily care that much. I just want you to, like, I'm Baker Mayfield, I want you to go ball. And also that's the reality of the world. Yeah. That's the reality of the world that we live in, is everyone is going to have an opinion about something. Now, the example of Rob Gronkowski, and not necessarily that I agree with it, but Rob's got rings. You don't. So, yeah, there might be a different viewpoint of you, whether it's right, wrong, or different. He's got rings and Odell doesn't. But at the end of the day, are you going to go have 8 catches for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, and whoop the corner against you? Then I don't necessarily care all that much about it. And also, we talk about diva receivers like they're poison. Like they're poison. Like, oh, if you're a diva receiver, you're going to kill me. Like, Randy Moss was a diva receiver. Michael Irvin was a diva receiver. And T.O. was a diva receiver. Like Chris Carter. Just because you have a little diva to you doesn't mean you can't be a great receiver still. No, there's no dispute. The one thing that no one would dispute is that Odell is a great receiver. I'm told Ryan Clark is still on the line and wants to jump in here with a thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this part of the conversation.
I hear Dan, and what Dan is saying is that as long as you get 8 for 150 and 2 tubs, he doesn't care. But we're not just talking about Dan Orlovsky, who understands professionals, who understands that it's about what you do within the white lines. And the example of Rob Gronkowski is something that not only Odell Beckham Jr. has talked about, but many of us has talked about with a guy, and it doesn't matter that if he has rings, a guy who's on the stage chugging and crowd surfing and doing these different things in Las Vegas. And if you've been around Odell Beckham, he doesn't do a ton of stuff. He's not a guy who you see out drinking. He's not a guy who you see out partying and getting in fights. Like, that's just not who he is. I mean, and you're talking, Booger kind of talked about showing people what you're doing. What he's doing is living all of, like, football players' dreams forever. He's a rock star. Like, he's not just a normal guy. So many times you listen to football players say they can't recognize me without my helmet. They're not as marketable because without their helmet, we don't know who they are. Well, they know who Odell Beckham Jr. is. I would venture to say in